Welcome to Comics and Stories, where all you have to do is lay down and relax while you listen. Tonight we will be reading Chapter 3 of Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Reed. Chapter 3, in which Cimrine meets a witch and has doubts about a wizard. Thranduil left, but he came back again the next day, and the day after that. It got so that Cimrine could not even step outside the cave without running into him. She might have been flattered if it hadn't been so obvious that Thranduil was only worried about how foolish he'd look if he went home without fighting the dragon. On his 5th visit, Cimrine was very sharp with him, and when he had not returned by mid-afternoon the next day, she began to hope that he had finally left for good. Cimrine was in the kitchen taking pits out of cherries when she heard someone knocking at the mouth of the cave. "Go away!" she shouted in complete exasperation. "I've told you and told you. I don't want to be rescued, and I'm not going to argue with you anymore." "I didn't come here to argue," said a no-nonsense female voice from outside. "I came to meet the person who keeps borrowing my crepe pan. It's not something there's normally much call for." "Oh dear," Cimrine said. She wiped her hands hastily on a corner of her apron and hurried out to greet her visitor. "I'm sorry," she said, coming around the gray rock at the cave mouth, "but I've been having a problem with knights lately, and I thought—" She stopped short as she got a good look at her caller for the first time. The woman standing outside the cave was considerably shorter than Cimrine. Her ginger hair was piled in waves on top of her head. She had a loose black robe with long sleeves, which she wore unbelted. A small pair of glasses with rectangular lenses sat firmly on her nose, and she carried an extremely twiggy broom in her left hand. Despite her unusual appearance, she projected an air of great self-assurance. "I quite understand," she said, studying Cimrine shrewdly. "You must be Kazul's new princess." "Yes, I'm Cimrine, and you are—" "Morwen," said the black-robed woman, leaning the broom against the rock. "Kazul and I have been friends for a long time, ever since I moved to the Enchanted Forest, so I thought I'd come have a look at her new princess." "You're the person Kazul's been borrowing dishes from, aren't you?" Cimrine said, and blinked. "And then you must be—" "A witch," Morwen finished. "I don't see why you find it surprising. It's not exactly an unusual profession in these parts." "It's just I've never met one. I haven't met one before," Cimrine said, not mentioning the fact that in Linderwall witches were considered dangerous and probably evil and were therefore avoided if at all possible. But then people in Linderwall didn't like dragons much either. "Won't you come in and have some tea?" "I certainly will," the witch said, and she did. She prowled around like a nervous cat while Cimrine put the kettle on the stove and got out the tea things. "Well," Cimrine said approvingly as Cimrine filled the teapot, "you're the first princess I've ever met who has the sense to keep up with the kitchen." Cimrine decided she liked Morwen's down-to-earth manner. She soon found herself telling Morwen everything, from the fencing and philosophy and Latin lessons to the seemingly endless stream of nights. The story lasted through 2 cups of tea and finished with Thranduil's stubborn insistence on rescuing her. "That's absurd," Morwen decided when Cimrine finished. "If this continues, you'll never get anything done." "I know," Cimrine said. "I keep telling them I don't want to be rescued, but they're all so honorable that none of them will tell anyone when they go back because they think it would be gossiping. More likely they don't want to look foolish." "Maybe, but even if they did tell people, I'm not sure anyone would believe it. I have a hard enough time convincing the knights when they show up in person." "It's just as well that your visitors have been honorable," Morwen said, looking thoughtful. "Linderwall's a prosperous kingdom. Sooner or later, the chance of getting hold of half of it is going to tempt someone to try rescuing you, whether you want to be rescued or not." "That hadn't occurred to me," Cimrine said with a worried frown. "What can I do about it?" "I'm not sure," Morwen replied. "The situation's not at all usual, you know. I've never heard of a princess volunteering for a dragon before, which rather surprises me now that I think about it. A dragon's princess is practically guaranteed a good marriage, so you'd think princesses from the smaller kingdoms would be clamoring for the job. They're probably worried about being eaten, Simran said. Do you think it would help if I sent my parents a letter? Probably not, Morwen said after a moment's consideration. But it can't hurt to try. I'll check my spell books when I get home. May give me an idea. I suggest you hunt through Kazul's library. She's been collecting scrolls for centuries. You ought to be able to find something useful. Meanwhile, we'll put up a sign. A sign, Simran? Simran stared at Morwen for a moment, then began to smile. Road washed out, she said. Use alternate route. Is that the kind of sign you were thinking of? Exactly, Morwen said with approval. It won't stop anyone who's really determined, but it will certainly slow them down. That should give us time to come up with something better. The two women set to work at once and in a short time produced a large, official-looking sign. Morwen offered to set it up on her way back to the enchanted forest, but Simran thought it would be too awkward for her to carry while riding the broom. So once Morwen had gone, Simran tucked the sign under her arm and started down the path. Simran had not had a chance to do any real exploring before, though she had looked out at the mountains every day and wondered. She was happy to have an excuse to see more of the outside of her new home. It was a lovely day, warm and sunny, and at first the path was level and easy. Simran was just beginning to wonder whether anyone would believe her sign when she got it up, when the path swung left around a boulder and narrowed to a tiny ledge that sloped steeply upward. Simran stopped. Now she knew why none of the knights had ridden up to the cave. The ledge was barely wide enough for a person on foot to edge along sideways. The best rider in the world couldn't have gotten a horse down it. Simran rolled her sign up into a firm, tight cylinder and stuck it through her belt. So she would have her hands free while she climbed. Then she stepped out onto the ledge. Sidling up the slope took a long time, for Simran was careful to make sure that each part of the ledge would hold before she trusted her weight on it. She was also careful not to look down. Heights had never bothered her before, but there was a big difference between standing solidly on top of a tower in Linderwall Castle, behind a 4-foot parapet, and inching along a ledge barely 6 inches wide with nothing between her and a long fall. She had almost reached the top of the slope where the path widened again, when a portion of the ledge disappeared just ahead of her. Simran pulled her foot back and tried to figure out what had happened. She hadn't seen or heard the rock crumble and fall away. There was simply a 2-foot gap in the ledge that hadn't been there before. She studied it for a moment, trying to think of a way of getting past. Nothing occurred to her. She felt a twinge of annoyance at the thought of all her wasted efforts, but cheered up at once when she realized that this would solve the problem of the visiting knights. If she couldn't get around or over the gap, an armored knight wouldn't be able to get by either. Simran smiled and turned her head to creep back to safety. There was another 2-foot gap in the ledge on her other side. Simran frowned. Something very odd was going on, and she didn't like it. You look like you are in need of assistance, said a deep voice from above her. May I be of help? Simran turned her head and saw a man standing 4 feet away on the path at the top of the ledge. He was tall and sharp-featured, and his eyes were hard, bright black. Though he had a gray beard that reached nearly to his waist, his face did not look old. He wore loose robes made of blue and gray silk, and in one hand he held a staff as tall as himself made of dark, polished wood. Possibly, Simran answered. She was certain that the man was a wizard, though he had never met one before, and she did not want to agree to anything until she was sure of what she was agreeing to. The court philosopher had always claimed that wizards were very tricky. May I know to whom I am speaking? I am the wizard Zemnar, the man said, and you must be Kazul's new princess. I hope you are not trying to run away. It's not done, Simran said, feeling particularly annoyed because, for once, she was not doing anything improper. Yes, I'm Simran. I was going to say that it isn't wise to run away from your dragon, the wizard corrected mildly. I believe it's done all the time. I'm sorry, Simran said, but she didn't try to explain. And I'm not running away. How did you know who I was? It seemed unlikely that I would find any other charming young lady walking so casually through the pass of silver ice, Zeminar answered. He smiled. You see, it is easy to find oneself in difficulties if one is not properly prepared. Cimmerian decided she didn't like him. He reminded her of one of her father's courtiers, a humorless, sneaky little man who paid her compliments only when he was after something and who couldn't resist giving advice even when nobody wanted it. The ledge was all there when I started, she said. An idea crossed her mind and she looked hard at Zeminar. I don't suppose you know what happened to the other two missing bits. A flash of startled annoyance crossed the wizard's face. Then his expression smoothed back into pleasant politeness. The Pass of Silver Ice is a strange place. Odd things frequently occur. Not like this, Cimmerian muttered. She was sure now that the wizard had made the ledge vanish so that he could pretend to rescue her. But she had no idea why he wanted her to think she owed him a favor. Actually, it surprised her that he had destroyed the ledge. She didn't think the dragons would be too happy when they found out, unless he hadn't really destroyed it. What did you say? Zeminar said, frowning uncertainly. Cimmerian ignored him. Without looking down, she slid her right foot along the ledge. The rock felt firm and solid. Slowly, she transferred her weight and brought her left foot up beside her right. She shifted again, still careful not to look down, and slid her right foot forward once again. What are you doing? Zeminar demanded. Getting off this ledge, Cimmerian replied. I should think that was obvious. One more step would bring her to the path, but Zeminar was squarely in her way. Would you mind moving back a little so I'll have somewhere to stand? Zeminar's eyes narrowed, but he backed up several paces, and Cimmerian stepped onto the path. She wanted to heave a sigh of relief, but she did not. She wasn't going to let Zeminar have the satisfaction of knowing she had been worried. Instead, she gave him her best royal smile and said with polite insincerity, Thank you for offering to help, but as you see, it wasn't needed. Do stop by and visit sometime. I will, Zeminar said, as if he meant it, and a very good day to you, Princess Cimmerian. With that, he vanished. There was no smoke or fire or whirlwind. There wasn't even a shimmer in the air as he disappeared. He was simply and suddenly gone. Cimmerian stared at the place where the wizard had been and felt a shiver run down her spine. It took a very powerful wizard indeed to vanish so quietly, and she still didn't know what he wanted. She shook herself and started down the path. She would worry about the wizard later. Right now she had to find a place to put up her sign so she could get back to the cave. She didn't feel much like exploring anymore. She hadn't taken more than 2 or 3 steps when a dark shadow passed over her. Looking up, startled, she saw a flash of yellow-green scales. An instant later, a dragon landed on the path in front of her, blocking the way completely. His tail hung over the edge, and he had to keep his wings partly unfurled in order to stay in balance. Cimmerian recognized him at once. It was the yellow-green dragon who had wanted to eat her the day she arrived so unexpectedly in the dragon's cave. I saw the whole thing, the dragon said with nasty triumphant glee, running away and talking to a wizard. Just wait until Kazul hears. She'll be sorry she didn't just let us eat you and be done with it. I offer you greetings and good fortune on your travels, Cimmerian said, figuring it was best to be polite to anyone as large and toothy as a dragon, even if he wasn't being at all polite to her. I am not running away. Then what are you doing? Kazul doesn't have any business that would bring you down this side of the pass. I came to put up a sign to keep the knights away, Cimmerian said. That's ridiculous, the dragon sniffed. I've been on patrol in this part of the mountains for the past week. I haven't seen or smelled even a hint of a knight. You haven't been by Kazul's cave then, Cimmerian said. At least 9 of them have shown up there in the past week, though for the past couple of days it's mostly been a prince. Princes don't smell any different from knights, and I'd have noticed if any of them were hanging around, the dragon said flatly. And what about that wizard you were talking to? Charge! George! Shouted a familiar voice from the other side of the dragon. Thranduil! Cimmerine shouted. I told you to go away! The yellow-green dragon twisted his long neck and glanced back over his shoulder. He seemed to bunch together like a cat, crouching. Then he sprang straight up in the air, and Cimmerine was blinded by the cloud of dust raised by the flapping of his enormous wings. She had the presence of mind to flatten her back against the rocks by the side of the path, and a moment later she heard someone blundering by. She stuck out her foot. Ow! She said as Thranduil fell over with a clatter. She'd forgotten he'd been wearing iron boots along with the rest of his armor. Cimmerine, is that you? Thranduil said, and then in an ancient... Of course it's me, Cimmerine replied, rubbing her ankle. Open your eyes, the dust settled. She looked up as she spoke and saw the dragon soar out of sight behind a cliff. I'm sorry, Thranduil said, and then in an anxious tone he added, I hope I didn't hurt you stumbling into you like that. Cimmerine started to say that it was nothing and it had been her fault anyway, when she suddenly got a much better idea. I think you've sprained my ankle, she declared. Oh no, Thranduil said. He sounded truly dismayed, though Cimmerine couldn't see his face because he was wearing a helmet with the visor down. I probably won't be able to walk for at least a month, she declared, and there's certainly no way I can climb down this mountain. But if you can't walk, Thranduil said, and paused. Then he squared his shoulders and went on. Then I suppose I'll have to carry you. He didn't sound like he liked the idea. I don't think that would work very well, Cimmerine said quickly. How will you fight when all the dragons come back if you are carrying me? No, you'll have to leave me here and go back alone. You can't stay here, Thranduil protested. The Cimmerine's talk of when all dragons come back had plainly made him nervous. I have to, Cimmerine said, trying to sound noble and long-suffering. The dragons will make sure I get back safely to Kazul's cave, and a month isn't too long to await after all. I don't understand, Thranduil said it, and he did look thoroughly puzzled. There's no point in you or anyone else coming up here to rescue me for at least a month. Not until my ankle's better, Cimmerine explained patiently. Oh, I see, Thranduil said. He lifted his head back and scanned the empty sky. You're quite sure you'll be all right? Then I'll just be going before those dragons return. He turned and started down the path as quickly as he could manage in full armor. And that is the end of Chapter 3.